Hey there, this is your teacher, Mr. H, and you're watching History in a Hoodie. Today's episode is about World War II, where we will learn all about Georgia's contributions to the Second World War. I can't wait to find out, so let's get the show started. What are we learning about today? The standard for today's lesson asks the students to describe key events leading up to the American involvement in World War II. We will also evaluate the purpose and economic impact of the Bell Bomber plant, military bases, and the Savannah and Brunswick shipyards. Finally, we will explain the economic and military contributions of Richard Russell and Carl Vinson. Before we start, let's go over some vocabulary for today's lesson. Isolationist is a country that chooses to stay out of the conflicts of other nations. The Centers for Disease Control is the National Institute for Controlling and Preventing the Spread of Diseases. The Bell Bomber plant is an aircraft manufacturer for the United States during World War II. Rationing means allowing each person only a fixed amount of food or other resources. World War II broke out in Europe in 1939, and the U.S. immediately saw it as Europe's problem. The First World War had caused the U.S. and the world to fall into a depression, and no one was immediately interested in jumping back into that fight. At the same time, Japan was taking over large portions of China, Southeast Asian countries, and Pacific Islands. Officially, the United States remained neutral in the conflict, not picking any sides. Despite their proclaimed neutrality, the USA was not above profiting from the war. The Lend-Lease Act was signed into law by FDR, which allowed Allied nations, Great Britain, Soviet Russia, China, and France, to buy American-built military hardware like tanks and airplanes. The Lend-Lease program kept Britain fighting in Europe at least until the U.S. would be pulled into the war. In the late 1930s, Japan invaded China. Successfully. Impressive, I know. Japan invaded China because Japan is a tiny island nation with limited resources, and the only way they could grow would be to expand the empire. The U.S. wasn't cool with Japan invading a trading partner in China, so an embargo was placed on Japan, especially in oil and steel. Their empire would crumble without oil and metal, so the nation had two choices: either give in and return Chinese territory, or fight back. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese Navy led a surprise attack against the Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. Over 2,000 Americans were killed and 150 ships were destroyed, leaving only a few aircraft carriers in the Pacific Fleet, as they had been out on training exercises that morning. The American morale was destroyed by these attacks. Surrounded by two oceans, no one thought that the World War would be brought to our shores. Some feared further attacks. If Japan could hit Hawaii and take out the Pacific Fleet, that meant the West Coast was vulnerable to further attacks. Perhaps San Diego, another major naval base, could be next. The wounded nation wouldn't stay down for long, though. 4 months later, those remaining aircraft carriers would be instrumental in leading the American counterattack in the Tokyo raids. 16 B-25 bombers were launched off a carrier and dropped bombs on military targets in Tokyo. While not as much damage was done as in Pearl Harbor, these raids, striking at the heart of Japan, bolstered Americans' morale and prepared citizens for a prolonged fight. The U.S. declared war on Japan. So Germany declared war on the U.S., and the U.S. declared war right back. The Second World War was on. So what? How did Georgia help with the war effort? Before and during the war, two Georgian politicians played major roles in making sure the United States was prepared militarily for their part in another massive war. Richard B. Russell was serving as a U.S. Senator from Georgia in the late 1930s when he advocated for Georgia to be home to military growth, including building or maintaining 15 military bases in the state and building the CDC in Atlanta. The CDC is the Centers for Disease Control, the world's headquarters for research on deadly diseases. Georgia was selected as the site because of mosquitoes. Seriously. Russell argued the point that the deadliest disease at the time was malaria, which is primarily spread by mosquito bites, and Georgia has plenty of mosquitoes to test the spread of the disease. Another important Georgian for this era was Carl Vinson, who was serving as Georgia's representative to the U.S. House when he said, "The most expensive thing in the world is a cheap army and navy." He made it his mission to see that the U.S. spent tons of money on developing the strongest military in the world, especially the Navy. He earned the nickname of the father of the two-ocean Navy by pushing through bills to build 10,000 planes, train 16,000 pilots, and establish 20 air bases for the Navy. Prior to Vinson's leadership, the U.S. was largely an isolationist nation far away from all the world's conflict. Now, the U.S. is the world's biggest superpower, which can police nations far away by rolling an aircraft carrier squadron right off the shore anywhere in the world. Georgia's military facilities played a huge role in getting the U.S. up and running after Pearl Harbor. In Marietta, right here in our own county, the Bell Bomber Plant was home to the B-29 bomber, the most technologically advanced bomber in the war. 650 bomber planes were produced in Marietta before the end of the war, and would continue to produce well into the Korean War as well. 30,000 people were employed at Bell Bomber during the war. Since, Bell Bomber was bought by Lockheed Martin, and continues to employ Cobb County residents to this day, especially with Dobbins Air Force Base located nearby as the plant's top consumer. Military bases in Georgia were still numerous from World War I, but they became bigger and more significant in World War II. Fort Benning was home to the best infantry training facility. Savannah and Brunswick shipyards on the coast were key for construction of over 180 Liberty ships, which transported troops and supplies to both the European and Pacific fronts. These bases were essential to winning World War II, but also, they still provide jobs and money to the local economies to this day. Now what? What am I going to do with this information? When there is a clear problem in the world, the great thing about Americans is that we band together to fix the problem. Fascism in Germany and Japan? We're there. And whether or not we are all able or willing to suit up in uniform and travel overseas to fight, we all support our soldiers in our own way. During the war, tens of thousands of Georgians were employed at bomber plants and shipyards in Georgia, including women for the first time. Everyday citizens back home rationed food and gas, and collected recyclables and scrap metal that could be turned into bullets and tanks. When we work together as a group and put our collective minds and strength together, there's nothing we cannot achieve. It goes back to the old saying, 2 heads are better than 1. It's exactly why your teachers make you do group work when you think you could get it done by yourself and avoid all the drama of working with others. The end result is going to be better than you individually could have imagined with a team working for a common purpose. Imagine what our country would be like if we could get all 325 million of us working together on one common purpose, moving in the same direction. Is there anything that couldn't be fixed? Poverty, drug abuse, violence, inequality, and more. What if we could get all 7 billion people on this planet working together? Wow, so learning about World War II is really important for us to understand. I'm glad we learned it today. Are you ready for some review questions? What was the significance of the Lend-Lease Act at the beginning of World War II? What main event caused the United States to enter World War II? In what ways were the shipyards and the Bell Bomber Plant not only beneficial to the war effort, but also to the people of Georgia? Which best describes the impact Richard Russell Jr. had on Georgia? This man served as a U.S. representative and is known for working with Congress to expand the U.S. Navy and for bringing the shipbuilding industry to Savannah and Brunswick. I hope all of you learned a lot from today's episode of History in a Hoodie about Georgia in World War II. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Just kidding, I don't care about that stuff. But do make sure you study this lesson. Bye now.